quiet town of Willow Creek, a sinister presence has taken root. As a mysterious vampire named Laura arrives, she begins to weave her web of darkness, luring unsuspecting souls into her clutches. People vanish without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of her insatiable hunger for power. But as ambitions swell, a chilling revelation dawns upon the town. They willingly surrender their minds to her, finding solace in her dark embrace. In a spine-tingling twist, the very ones she enslaves begin to hail her as their savior, as she ascends to her throne as the unlikely vampire queen, forever blurring the line between salvation and damnation. The quaint town of Willow Creek had seen its share of newcomers, but none as captivating as Laura Blackwood. Her arrival on a crisp autumn morning caused quite a stir among the townsfolk. A parade of movers carefully unloaded an array of antiques, each piece seemingly more exquisite than the last, into the old Henderson mansion she had recently acquired. The mansion, long abandoned and whispered to be haunted, now buzzed with activity, its once dusty windows gleaming under the touch of the new owner. From a safe distance, Danny Marsh observed the scene unfold. He leaned casually against his battered pickup truck, a half-lit cigarette dangling from his lips. His sharp eyes, a striking shade of blue, missed nothing, especially not the beautiful Laura, who directed the movers with a graceful yet commanding presence. Danny's mind, always scheming, recognized an opportunity. "Antiques," he muttered to himself. "Each one's got to be worth a fortune." Danny was no stranger to the art of the con. He had drifted into Willow Creek a year ago, charming his way into the hearts and wallets of its unsuspecting residents. His past was a patchwork of aliases and scams, ranging from selling fake vintage wine to posing as a real estate investor. But Laura Blackwood, with her mysterious allure and her trove of treasures, presented a challenge unlike any he had faced. As he watched Laura gracefully navigating her new domain, Danny's mind raced with plans. He knew he needed to get close to her, to gain her trust. His usual charm and smooth talk would be his tools, but he sensed that with Laura, he would need something more. She was different, an enigma wrapped in elegance. "Time to turn on the charm, Danny boy," he whispered to himself, flicking the cigarette away and straightening his jacket. He knew the first step was to craft a new persona, one that would appeal to a woman of Laura's taste and class. Danny planned to introduce himself as a local historian, an antique enthusiast, offering to help Laura understand the history of her new home and its previous occupants. It was a perfect cover, one that would grant him access to both the mansion and its owner. As the movers carried the last of the antiques inside, and Laura disappeared behind the heavy oak doors of the Henderson mansion, Danny felt a thrill of excitement. This was more than just a con, it was a game, and Laura Blackwood was an opponent worthy of his skills. But what Danny didn't know was that Laura was not just another wealthy mark. In her, the shadows of the past stirred, and the mansion held secrets far darker than any con he had ever pulled. As the doors of the Henderson mansion closed, they didn't just shut out the autumn chill, they sealed Danny's fate, entwining it with the mystery of Laura Blackwood and her haunting collection. Danny took a deep breath before ringing the bell of the Henderson mansion. His reflection in the polished brass door knocker showed a man transformed, a crisp, tailored suit replacing his usual casual attire, a confident smile playing on his lips. He had spent the last few days studying the history of the town and its antiques, preparing himself for this moment. The door swung open, revealing Laura in her enigmatic beauty. She wore a dress that seemed to belong to another era, accentuating her timeless grace. Her dark eyes sparkled with a hint of amusement as she greeted him. "Mr. Marsh, is it?" she said, her voice a melody that resonated with an accent Danny couldn't place. "I'm intrigued by your interest in local history." Danny, playing the part of the historian, launched into a rehearsed spiel about the mansion's past. As he spoke, he noticed Laura's expression change subtly. Her smile grew, not in warmth, but in what seemed like amusement. "My dear Mr. Marsh, while your efforts are commendable, you are quite mistaken on several accounts," she interjected gracefully, her laughter like chimes in the wind. "The Hendersons never owned this mansion in the 1800s. It was built much later." Danny felt a flush of embarrassment. His carefully constructed persona was unraveling before him. He realized, with a mixture of awe and intimidation, that Laura's intelligence far surpassed his own. She was toying with him, a cat with a mouse caught in its paws. However, to Danny's surprise, Laura's amusement didn't seem malicious. "You're quite the character, Mr. Marsh. I admire your determination. Would you care to join me for dinner? I have a few tales about the mansion that might interest you." Danny, his ego bruised but still in the game, accepted her invitation. He couldn't shake the feeling of being outmatched, yet the thrill of the challenge egged him on. As he followed her into the dining room, he couldn't help but marvel at the grandeur surrounding him. The room was a treasure trove of antiques, each piece whispering of a bygone era. Over dinner, Laura spoke of the mansion's history with an intimacy that suggested first-hand experience. Her knowledge was vast, covering not just the building, but the intricate details of the periods the antiques came from. Danny, usually so confident in his charm, found himself listening more than speaking, mesmerized by her stories. As the evening drew to a close, Danny realized he had underestimated Laura. She was no ordinary mark. She was a puzzle, complex and fascinating. He thanked her for the dinner, a genuine sense of respect mingling with his usual facade of charm. "I look forward to our next meeting, Mr. Marsh," Laura said with a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. As Danny stepped out into the cool night air, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had walked into the Henderson mansion as the hunter, but as he left, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might be the one ensnared in a game far beyond his understanding. The shadows of the mansion seemed to laugh at him, whispering secrets he was yet to uncover. The tranquility of Willow Creek was shattered by the news that spread like wildfire through its streets. 2 boys, both around 10 years old, had gone missing. Panic and fear gripped the heart of the town as parents held their children a little tighter, and neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The local police, a small force unaccustomed to such events, were under immense pressure to find the boys. Rumors swirled, some pointing fingers at strangers seen in town, others whispering about old legends and curses. Amidst this chaos, Laura Blackwood, the mysterious new resident of the Henderson mansion, became a subject of speculation. Her arrival coincided with the unsettling event, and in small towns, newcomers often bore the brunt of suspicion. It wasn't long before the police, following protocol more than actual suspicion, knocked on the door of the mansion. Laura greeted them with her usual poise, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Good evening, officers. To what do I owe the pleasure?" she asked, her voice calm and controlled. "Miss Blackwood, we're conducting inquiries regarding the 2 boys who've gone missing. We're speaking to everyone in the area," one of the officers explained, his discomfort in her presence evident. Laura raised an eyebrow, a faint smile on her lips. "I see. And you suspect me, a lone woman who has barely settled in, of foul play. Is this a customary welcome for new residents in Willow Creek?" The officers exchanged glances, their unease growing. "No, ma'am. It's just standard procedure. We have to check with everyone." Laura's gaze seemed to pierce through them, her intellect casting a shadow that made the officers feel out of their depth. "Well, officers, I assure you I have no information about the missing children. Perhaps your time would be better spent searching rather than questioning those who have nothing to hide." The police, realizing that they would glean nothing from this interaction, thanked her and left, feeling somehow that they had been dismissed rather than concluding their questioning. After the door closed behind them, Laura's expression turned cold. She descended into the cellar of the mansion, a place where the antiques were older and the air hung heavy with secrets. There, in the dim light, lay the bodies of the two boys, their faces peaceful in eternal slumber. Laura looked down at them, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Enough food for the next couple of days," she murmured to herself. The boys, now part of the mansion's dark history, were a testament to her survival. A survival that had spanned centuries, feeding on the unsuspecting and the lost. The cellar, with its stone walls and shadowed corners, held more than just wine and antiques. It was a sanctuary for Laura, a place where she could embrace her true nature, away from the prying eyes of the world above. As she prepared her grim feast, the mansion above stood silent, guarding its mistress and her ancient secrets. Danny returned to the Henderson mansion with a mix of trepidation and intrigue. The previous night's encounter with Laura had left him feeling both outwitted and captivated. He knocked on the massive door, his mind racing with questions about the enigmatic woman who lived within. Laura greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Marsh, what a pleasant surprise. Do come in." As Danny stepped into the foyer, he sensed a change in the atmosphere. The mansion seemed more imposing, and Laura's presence more commanding. He followed her into the drawing room, unaware that he was walking into a trap carefully laid by centuries of cunning. "Laura, about the other night," Danny began, but Laura raised a hand to silence him. "Mr. Marsh, I have a proposition for you," she said, her voice smooth like silk. "I find myself in need of let's call it a personal assistant, someone to manage my affairs and ensure my privacy. I believe you could be quite suitable for the role." Danny, surprised by the offer, hesitated. "I'm not sure that's my kind of work, Laura." "Oh, but I insist," Laura replied, her eyes locking onto his. It was then that Danny felt a strange sensation, as if his will was being siphoned away. Laura's gaze held him captive, and he found himself unable to look away. Laura's voice became a hypnotic melody, weaving around Danny, penetrating his thoughts. "You will serve me, Danny. Your life as you know it is over. You belong to me now." Danny tried to resist, but it was like fighting a tidal wave with his bare hands. He felt his identity, his ambitions, even his cunning being drowned in the depths of Laura's will. She was binding him to her, turning him into a servant, bound by an invisible, unbreakable chain. When the process was complete, Danny stood before Laura, his eyes empty of the rebellion and scheming that once filled them. He was now her dedicated servant, a puppet whose strings were firmly in Laura's hands. "Good," Laura said with satisfaction. "Now we must attend to certain needs of mine. You will help me, Danny. You will bring me what I require." Laura explained her true nature to the now submissive Danny. She was a vampire, an immortal predator who fed on human blood. Danny, as her servant, would be responsible for luring unsuspecting victims to the mansion. She promised him eternal servitude in return for his obedience, a twisted reward for a life spent conning others. Danny, devoid of his own will, accepted his new role without question. He became an extension of Laura's desires, a tool she wielded with precision. The Henderson mansion, once a symbol of mystery and allure, now harbored a dark alliance between predator and unwilling prey. As the sun set over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the town, Danny stepped out into the night on his first errand for his new mistress. The roles had been reversed. The con man was now the slave, bound to serve the whims of an ancient and merciless vampire. The discovery of the boys' bodies in the lake sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The town, already on edge from their disappearance, plunged into a state of collective panic and fear. The police, upon examining the bodies, found them drained of blood, with small, precise puncture wounds on their necks. This eerie detail unleashed a torrent of whispers and superstitions among the townspeople, with talk of dark, ancient entities that lurked in the shadows. Danny, under Laura's control, had been the one to dispose of the bodies. His once familiar features now bore a gaunt, haunted look. His movements mechanical and devoid of the charm he was known for. This drastic change did not go unnoticed. Murmurs began to spread, linking Danny's altered demeanor and appearance with the sinister events unfolding in Willow Creek. The situation escalated when a local farmhand, known for his punctuality and dedication, mysteriously vanished. He had been due to tend to livestock at a nearby farm, but never showed up. His disappearance added fuel to the fire of rumors and accusations that were beginning to spiral out of control. The townspeople, gripped by fear and suspicion, started pointing fingers. Some mentioned the Henderson mansion and its enigmatic new resident. Others recalled the legends of the old mansion and its supposed curse. But a growing number of eyes turned towards Danny, the once charming stranger who now seemed like a different person. Whispers turned into open discussions at the local diner, the post office, and on the streets. People recounted old stories of vampires and creatures of the night, tales they had dismissed as mere folklore. Now these stories took on a new, terrifying relevance. The Henderson mansion has always been bad news, one local was overheard saying at the diner. And that Danny, have you seen him lately? Looks like a ghost, he does. Something's not right there. Another chimed in, and those poor boys, drained of blood, they said. It's like something out of a horror book. We've never had such things happen here before. Fear turned into paranoia, and paranoia bred suspicion. The town's once friendly and trusting atmosphere began to crumble. Neighbors eyed each other warily, and the streets grew quiet as night fell. People locked their doors and windows, casting nervous glances towards the looming silhouette of the Henderson mansion against the night sky. In the mansion, Laura watched the chaos unfold in the town below with a cold detachment. The fear and turmoil were inconsequential to her, mere ripples on the surface of her eternal existence. But for Danny, trapped in servitude, the whispers and accusations of the townsfolk were a distant echo of a life he could no longer claim as his own. He was a pawn in a game played by a creature as old as time, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. As days passed, a mysterious sickness enveloped Willow Creek. The once bustling streets became eerily quiet, with the townspeople afflicted by an unexplained weakness and fatigue. They moved lethargically, like shadows of their former selves, drained of vitality and spirit. The local clinic was overwhelmed, yet no diagnosis could be found for this sudden plague that seemed to sap the life from its victims. Amidst this growing crisis, another person went missing. Mrs. Henderson, the local librarian. Known for her vibrant personality and love for community events, her disappearance added a new layer of fear to the already panicked town. Mrs. Henderson, last seen heading towards the Henderson mansion for a book donation, never returned home. The town, once a picture of rural charm and close-knit community, now resembled a ghost town. Only a few people, those still clinging to some semblance of strength, could be seen shuffling around. The once cheerful conversations at the diner and the laughter of children playing in the park were now distant memories. In stark contrast to the town's despair, the Henderson mansion seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy and life. Within its walls, Laura presided over her growing vampire family. The 2 boys, the farmhand, and 2 new members, a young couple who had recently moved to Willow Creek, sat around her, their eyes glowing with the same crimson hue as hers. The mansion was alive with the sounds of their new existence, the soft whispers of plotting, the gentle rustle of movement, and the occasional low laughter. The antique-filled rooms, once silent and brooding, now echoed with the presence of the undead. Laura looked upon her new family with a sense of accomplishment. "It's just like old times," she murmured, a smile curling her lips. The memories of her lost family, once a source of pain, were now being replaced by this new assembly of creatures bound to her will. Outside, the moon cast a pale light over the withering town, its glow seemingly absorbed by the darkened windows of the mansion. The residents of Willow Creek, unaware of the true source of their malaise, continued to succumb to the strange sickness. Unbeknownst to them, it was the work of Laura's expanding brood, who ventured out under the cover of night to feed, leaving their victims alive but drained of vitality. In the mansion, plans were being made. Laura, with centuries of cunning and strategy, plotted the next steps for her family. They would need to be careful, to feed without drawing too much attention, to grow in strength without revealing their existence. But for now, they reveled in their newfound power, the mansion a beacon of dark life in the midst of a dying town. The future was uncertain, but under Laura's guidance, they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The night was theirs, and they would make the most of it. Inside the dimly lit grandeur of the Henderson mansion, Laura's impatience was palpable. She paced the room like a caged animal, her elegant demeanor giving way to a more primal nature. Danny, standing obediently at the edge of the room, watched her with lifeless eyes. "You are proving quite useless, Danny," Laura snapped, her voice a mix of irritation and hunger. "I require sustenance, more than what you've been providing. Do you wish for me to starve?" Danny remained silent, his will entirely subjugated to her demands. The transformation from a cunning con man to a docile servant was complete. Outside, the town of Willow Creek was in turmoil. The day had dawned with heavy hearts as families prepared to lay the 2 young boys to rest. But a new horror unfolded when it was discovered that the boys' bodies were missing from their coffins. Grief turned to chaos, with distraught families and a bewildered community grappling with this unfathomable turn of events. Meanwhile, in the shadowed depths of the mansion's cellar, a sinister transformation was taking place. The 2 boys, thought to be lost forever, stirred. Their eyes opened, revealing a haunting crimson glow. They were no longer the children they had been. They were now fledgling vampires, reborn into darkness under Laura's malevolent influence. Laura descended the stairs, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and a twisted maternal pride. "Welcome to my family, my children," she cooed, observing the confused and frightened boys. Danny, witnessing the scene, showed no reaction. The horror of what was unfolding before him was lost to his ensnared mind. "Now, Danny," Laura turned her attention back to her servant. "You must provide for 3. Soon we shall have a full house again." Her voice held a hint of nostalgia and a trace of cruelty. As Laura spoke, her mind wandered back to a time long past, a memory that she had kept hidden in the darkest corners of her existence. She remembered a grand house filled with laughter and the night air echoing with the playful calls of her vampire family. But that joy was shattered one fateful night, when vampire hunters, armed with stakes and holy water, descended upon them. The memory of fire, screams, and the bitter smell of betrayal filled her senses. Laura had survived, using her cunning and ruthlessness to outwit the hunters. She escaped into the night, leaving behind the smouldering ruins of her family. That loss had hardened her, turning her into the remorseless creature she was today. Back in the present, Laura's gaze fell upon Danny and the two new vampires. "You must learn quickly," she said to the boys. "The world is cruel, and we must be crueler to survive." As night fell over Willow Creek, the town remained unaware of the growing darkness within the Henderson mansion, a darkness that was preparing to spread its shadows, with Laura at its heart and Danny as its unwilling harbinger. The desolate streets of Willow Creek echoed with the sound of footsteps as Laura, accompanied by the ghostly figure of Danny, emerged from the mansion. Danny, once full of life and cunning, now walked beside her as a living corpse, a testament to Laura's power and ruthlessness. As they passed, the few remaining townsfolk peeked through their curtains, their eyes widening in fear and disbelief. Laura, a figure of elegance and terror, strode confidently towards the town hall. The building, usually a hub of community activity, was now a shelter for the few remaining villagers, the police force, the mayor, and some key figures of the town. Inside, a heated meeting was underway. Voices were raised in frustration and fear, discussing plans to combat the mysterious sickness and the recent disappearances. The town was on the brink of collapse, and desperation filled the air. The doors of the town hall burst open, silencing the room instantly. Laura stepped in, her presence commanding and chilling. Danny followed, his dead eyes scanning the room. "I have come to help," Laura announced, her voice resonating with an authority that demanded attention. "Who is in charge here?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces. The mayor, a middle-aged man with a look of bewilderment, stood up. "I am," he declared, trying to muster his authority. In a blur of movement, Laura lunged at him, knocking him down with ease. The room gasped in shock as she stood over the mayor, her figure dominating the space. "Now who is in charge?" she asked again, her voice cold and unyielding. The room remained silent, the realization dawning on them that the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. Laura addressed the room, her plan unfolding with each word. "You are all now servants of mine," she declared. "Your town has been draining its citizens of their lives through taxation and laws that cannot be obeyed. I, on the other hand, am a fair ruler. I will take only what I need." The townsfolk, the police, and the officials looked at each other in horror and disbelief. Laura's declaration was unfathomable, yet the evidence of her power was unmistakable. "I will restore order to this town," Laura continued. "In return, you will provide me and my family with what we require. Refuse, and you will face consequences far worse than any law or tax." The room, now a mix of fear and reluctant acceptance, nodded in agreement. Laura's rule was now the law of the land, and resistance seemed futile. As Laura and Danny left the town hall, the remaining townsfolk began to understand the gravity of their new reality. Willow Creek, once a peaceful and vibrant community, was now under the control of an ancient and merciless vampire. Their lives, their town, their very existence were now at the mercy of Laura and her dark family. The night had fallen on Willow Creek, and with it, a new era had begun, an era of shadows and servitude. Months had passed since Laura had taken control of Willow Creek. Under her rule, the town had seen a strange kind of prosperity. The mysterious sickness had ceased, and the townspeople were allowed to keep what they earned. The only tribute Laura demanded was a fresh supply of blood each day, a tax paid in life rather than coin. The town, though under the shadow of vampiric rule, had adapted to this new normal, but the peace was not to last. Word of the changes in Willow Creek had spread beyond its borders, catching the attention of a group of vampire hunters. Seasoned and relentless, they arrived in town, driven by tales of a vampire who had taken an entire town under her thrall. Laura, sensing their arrival, stood at the window of her mansion, watching the night. "Oh, revenge," she whispered to herself. To her, these hunters were no different from the ones who had destroyed her family over a century ago. Time held little meaning for her. All humans were the same, either food or servants. The vampire hunters gathered in an abandoned warehouse, away from the prying eyes of the townspeople. They were a diverse group, each with their own reasons for pursuing the undead. Some sought vengeance for loved ones lost, others were driven by a sense of duty to eradicate the vampire threat, and a few were motivated by the thrill of the hunt. They laid out their weapons: stakes, crosses, holy water, and garlic. They discussed strategies and shared knowledge of vampire lore. Each hunter knew the risks involved in confronting a vampire as old and powerful as Laura, but their resolve was unshaken. The hunters planned to assault the mansion at dawn, when they believed Laura and her brood would be weakest. They split into teams, each with a specific role. Some would infiltrate the mansion to find and destroy the vampires, while others would set traps and secure the perimeter to prevent any escape. As the hunters prepared for the impending assault, the town of Willow Creek slept uneasily, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Inside the mansion, Laura gathered her family, briefing them on the hunters' presence and their likely plan of attack. "We shall meet their aggression with our own," Laura said, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "They seek to destroy us, but they will find that we are not so easily vanquished." The vampire family readied themselves for the confrontation, each aware of the stakes. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the dominion they had established over Willow Creek. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the hunters made their move, advancing towards the mansion with weapons drawn and hearts steeled for battle. The final confrontation between the ancient vampire and the hunters was about to begin, and with it, the fate of Willow Creek hung in the balance. As the first light of dawn seeped through the windows of the Henderson mansion, the first wave of vampire hunters burst through the doors. They moved with precision and determination, a well-oiled machine of destruction. They encountered members of Laura's vampire family in the corridors, engaging in a fierce battle. Despite the vampire's strength and agility, the hunters managed to overpower two of them, pinning them down to drive stakes through their hearts. The vampires crumbled into dust, their immortal lives extinguished. The hunters advanced to the main room, where Laura sat waiting, an air of calm defiance about her. "Welcome, insects," she greeted them with a mocking sneer. As the hunters charged, Laura rose from her chair. Her movements were a blur, a dance of death that no human eye could follow. She was no ordinary vampire. Her speed was unearthly, her power beyond comprehension. Within seconds, the hunters lay strewn across the floor, their lives snuffed out by Laura's merciless hands. Alerted by the commotion, the second wave of hunters stormed into the mansion. They found Laura seated once again, her eyes glowing with dark amusement. As they prepared to attack, Laura whispered an ancient mantra, her voice weaving a spell of old and forbidden magic. The bodies of the fallen hunters began to twitch and convulse, rising to their feet. The eyes that opened were no longer human, but glowed with a sinister light. The dead hunters turned on their living comrades, engaging them in a brutal and chaotic battle. The mansion's grand room turned into a war zone, with hunter fighting hunter, and Laura watching from her throne-like chair. The sound of combat filled the air, the clash of weapons, the snarls of the undead, and the cries of the dying. When the dust settled, only 2 hunters remained, battered and bloodied, standing amidst the carnage. They looked up at Laura, their eyes filled with a mix of horror and resignation. "Welcome to the family," Laura said, her voice dripping with a sinister warmth. Before they could react, she was upon them, her fangs sinking into their necks. Their struggles weakened as Laura's venom worked its transformation. When she released them, they were changed, no longer hunters, but members of her vampire family. Their eyes glowed with the same crimson hue as hers, their humanity lost to the dark gift of vampirism. The Henderson Mansion, once a symbol of horror and oppression, had withstood the assault of the hunters. Laura, more powerful than ever, stood at the heart of her growing family. The town of Willow Creek, still oblivious to the true nature of its ruler, continued its uneasy existence under her shadow. Laura looked out from her mansion, her gaze sweeping over the town. She had defended her domain, expanded her family, and the night was still hers to command. The world outside remained unaware of the dark power that resided within the walls of the Henderson Mansion, a power that had once again proven itself to be both formidable and unyielding. As the seasons changed, so too did the town of Willow Creek under Laura's rule. The once fearful and oppressed community began to flourish in a way that was unprecedented. Without the burden of taxes and fines imposed by traditional human governance, the residents kept the entirety of their earnings. This financial liberation brought a wave of prosperity and innovation to the town. Crime became virtually non-existent. Any disputes or conflicts among the townspeople were brought before Laura. Her judgments were swift and fair, not swayed by personal gain or favoritism. She ruled with an iron fist, but also with a surprising sense of justice. Her only demand was the tribute of blood, a price the townspeople had come to accept as the cost of their newfound prosperity. Businesses thrived as they no longer faced the crippling weight of taxes. The local farmers' market blossomed into a bustling hub of trade, attracting vendors and customers from neighboring areas. The schools, funded generously by the town's newfound wealth, offered a level of education that was the envy of surrounding communities. The arts flourished as well, with musicians, painters, and writers finding in Willow Creek a haven of creative freedom and support. The town, once a mere speck on the map, became a cultural hotspot. Its galleries and theaters a testament to the renaissance it was experiencing. News of Willow Creek's transformation spread far and wide, becoming a topic of discussion in towns and cities struggling under the weight of economic hardship. It wasn't long before a visitor from a neighboring town, burdened by heavy taxation and stifling laws, arrived at Laura's doorstep. The visitor, a representative of his community, had come with a plea. They had heard of the prosperity and peace in Willow Creek and wanted Laura to extend her rule over their town. They spoke of the crippling taxes that left their families in poverty and the laws that hindered their growth. Laura listened, her eyes gleaming with a mix of interest and calculation. She saw an opportunity to expand her domain, not through force or fear, but through an offer of a better life. She agreed to their request, with the same terms she had imposed on Willow Creek: absolute loyalty and the nightly tribute. Soon, other towns followed suit, drawn by the promise of prosperity and freedom from the shackles of traditional governance. Laura's region grew, encompassing a swath of territory where she was the undisputed ruler. Her demands remained consistent: fair rule in exchange for the blood tribute. Under her reign, the region experienced a golden age of sorts. The streets were safe, the people were free from economic burden, and justice was served impartially. Laura, once a feared vampire, had become an unlikely symbol of hope and progress. Yet, beneath the veneer of this utopia, there was an unspoken understanding. Laura's rule, while benevolent in many ways, was absolute. Her word was law, and her wrath, though rarely seen, was something to be feared. The townsfolk lived with the knowledge that their prosperity came at a price paid in the shadows, where the vampire family fed, ensuring the continuation of their dark legacy. Laura's influence, which began in the small town of Willow Creek, started to ripple outwards, reaching the higher echelons of the country's politics. Her reputation as a fair and effective ruler in her region had caught the attention of the nation. People, tired of the inefficiencies and corruption often associated with traditional politics, began to see Laura as a symbol of change and efficiency. Laura's ascent in the political arena was as strategic as it was swift. Using her centuries of knowledge and understanding of human nature, she began to build alliances with key political figures. Her offers were always enticing: support for policies that would genuinely benefit the public in exchange for their loyalty. Those who opposed her found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Laura's tactics were subtle and often indirect, but always effective. Her opponents found their careers dwindling as scandals mysteriously came to light, or key supporters suddenly changed allegiances. At the same time, Laura implemented policies in her region that were revolutionary. She introduced social welfare programs that eradicated poverty, established healthcare systems that were the envy of neighboring states, and funded educational initiatives that produced remarkable results. Crime rates plummeted under her strict but fair governance, and the economy flourished as businesses thrived without oppressive taxes. Word of her successes spread, painting her as a maverick politician who genuinely cared for the people. This public image was bolstered by her enigmatic charisma, making her a popular figure among the masses. The media, too, were captivated by this new, dynamic leader who seemed to be bringing about real change. As Laura's fame grew, she was eventually invited to play a more significant role in the national government. Her policies, proven effective in her region, began to be implemented on a larger scale. She advocated for reforms that cut down on governmental waste, fought against corruption, and promoted transparency in politics. However, behind the scenes, Laura's methods were not always as benevolent as they seemed. Her network of vampires, loyal only to her, worked in the shadows. They gathered information, influenced key decisions, and ensured that Laura's will was carried out. Her rule, though seemingly democratic, was underpinned by a subtle manipulation that only she could orchestrate. Under Laura's guidance, the country underwent a transformation. The economy was revitalized, public trust in the government was restored, and the quality of life for the average citizen improved dramatically. Yet, in the quiet of the night, Laura's true nature prevailed. The tribute of blood continued, a dark reminder that her benevolent rule came at a hidden cost. Laura had become a paradox, a vampire matriarch who was both feared and revered. To the public, she was a saving grace, a politician who was making their lives better. But to those who knew her true nature, She was a reminder that power could come from the most unlikely and darkest of sources. Her reign marked a new era, one where the lines between good and evil, benevolence and malevolence, were blurred under the rule of an immortal being whose intentions were as complex as her very existence. Laura's rise to power, which began in the quaint town of Willow Creek, culminated in her unprecedented ascent to the highest political office. Election after election, her influence and popularity grew, as did the belief in her vision for a better future. Her policies, once confined to her region, had proven so effective that they became a blueprint for national prosperity. The public, seeing the tangible improvements in their lives, rallied behind her, propelling her to victory in each electoral contest. When Laura won the presidency, it was a landslide victory, a testament to her widespread appeal and the deep-rooted desire for change among the citizens. However, Laura had grander plans than merely being a president. She intended to transform the role, and in doing so, the very structure of governance. In a bold move, Laura proposed a radical restructuring of the political system, arguing that the traditional model of democracy was inefficient and often mired in bureaucracy. She advocated for a more streamlined form of governance, with a singular, visionary leader at the helm. Her charisma and proven track record swayed public opinion, and through a series of referendums and legislative changes, Laura's position evolved from that of a president to a monarch. Thus, Laura became the Queen, a ruler with unparalleled authority and influence. The title was symbolic of her role as the protector and guide of the nation, and it resonated with the people, who saw her as a regal and benevolent figure. Under Queen Laura's rule, the country transformed into a utopia. Each state, city and town was overseen by one of her vampires, each chosen for their loyalty and ability to carry out her will. These vampire governors maintained order, ensured justice, and implemented Laura's policies with unwavering dedication. The nation flourished like never before. Poverty was eradicated, crime rates dropped to historic lows, and education and healthcare systems became models for the world, driven by innovation and a spirit of communal cooperation. The arts and sciences thrived, leading to a renaissance of culture and knowledge. Queen Laura, sitting upon her throne, was the architect of this golden age. Her vision had brought about an era of peace and prosperity, but at its core, it was a kingdom built upon a secret pact. The nightly tribute of blood continued, a dark undercurrent to the utopian society she had created. It was a price the vampires collected discreetly, maintaining the illusion of a perfect nation. The world looked on in awe and envy at the nation under the Vampire Queen's rule. Diplomatic relations and international policies were handled with the same cunning and foresight that had characterized Laura's rise to power. Other countries sought to emulate her model, seeing the results but unaware of the true nature of her reign. Laura, now the most powerful ruler in the world, presided over her kingdom with a blend of magnanimity and iron control. Her reign was a paradox, a beacon of progress and enlightenment, shadowed by the ancient, primal pact that sustained her and her kind. The Vampire Queen, once a creature lurking in the shadows, now sat in the light, her throne a symbol of a new world order. Her rule was a testament to the complex tapestry of human and inhuman ambition, where the lines between benevolence and tyranny, mortality and immortality, were forever blurred. The world had changed under her reign, and the future, though bright, held within it the indelible mark of the night and the enigmatic will of the Vampire Queen.
And if you're still looking to fulfill your thirst for more horror, don't forget to check out this next video Unless, of course, you are frozen with fear already.